Hey everybody, how you doing? This is episode 5, Fingerprints, with regards to the Las Vegas shooting and forensics evidence. Today we're going to look at fingerprint evidence, how it's collected, how it pertains to different items found at the crime scene, and different methods in how prints are lifted. So I'm going to jump right into it. So how fingerprints are collected. Collecting patent prints. This is the first example of what we're going to be looking at today. And essentially what a patent print is a mark left in blood or dirt or some sort of residue from a hand or a finger or a palm or a foot, and how that is recovered from the crime scene. In this case, prints are photographed in high resolution with the measurement scale adjacent to the image. So a patent print is what we see right here. This is a fingerprint that's left in blood with the scale next to it. And what is done at the crime scene is this print is photographed at the crime scene. It can also be lifted with a piece of clear tape and further analyzed at the lab. So this is a patent print. Secondly, collecting latent prints. So a latent print, again, is basically your standard print. But how they do this is a bit different from a simple photograph. In this method, they gather the fingerprint with powder, and here it says aluminum flake, black magnetic type of powder, and then they move forward with the tape to lift the print. So what we're looking at here is a latent fingerprint. And here's a short video on how to lift a fingerprint with this method.
For today's activity, I'm going to teach you how to lift a fingerprint off of a surface. We have 3 types of fingerprints: latent, which we'll be collecting today, patent, and plastic. Latent fingerprints are invisible to the naked eye and need to be developed so you can see them in order to collect them. Patent fingerprints are in a substance like blood. Plastic fingerprints are in a 3-dimensional substance like chocolate or putty. For the instance today, we're going to be fingerprinting this desk area. So we're going to be using magnetic fingerprint powder and a magnetic fingerprint wand. I'll show you how the wand works. You just have the end depressed, then it will pick up the magnetic fibers. If you pull on the end, it releases the magnetic fibers. So we'll pick up some fibers, and we're just gently going to fingerprint the surface that we're interested in. Keep in mind that the wand itself should never actually touch the table. It doesn't need to. We just want the fibers, the magnetic fibers, running over the print. We're going to clean this up a little bit before we actually collect it. Interestingly enough about fingerprints are made up of 3 things: sweat, oil, and protein. It's the oil in your fingerprints that the magnetic fibers are actually clinging to. There's many different types of fingerprint powder and tape, and the type that you use is really going to be dictated by the surface that you're printing. The tape that we're using today is called diff lift. What you're going to want to do is fold the end over slightly so you have an area to grab. And what I like to do is I like to look at the fingerprint that I've developed and then judge how much tape I'm actually going to need. So in this case, I'm really only going to need about 2 to 3 inches. You can see the print on the table. I'm just going to hold the end that I've folded over. So right down and smooth the edges down. The tape can move sometimes, so I do like to hold the corner as I smooth the tape out. We'll leave that for just a second and grab what we call a lift card. This is the back of the lift card. The front is glossy. The glossy part's where you want to put your fingerprint lift. The back is where you can draw a diagram of where you remove the lift from, and also it has many lines so you can put your case information. So I'll set the card down. The print is nice and smoothed out. I'm going to slowly peel back, grab the side, and just lay the tape right down on the back of the lift card. And again, smooth it out. So now you can see the latent fingerprint that we lifted.
So as you can see in that example, that is how a latent fingerprint is pulled from a non-porous surface. Now that means a hard surface, like a table or a door or a piece of glass or whatever, a gun, a muzzle, anything hard. This is how you pull a latent fingerprint, document it, secure it to investigate at the lab. Now, what initially interested me in creating this video was the tape, the green piece of tape at the crime scene that we see on top of the notepad and on this tube right here. So initially, that's what interested me. And if we could attain a print from that tape, and to prove that Stephen Paddock did this by himself, there would be fingerprints on the adhesive portion of the tape that could identify Stephen Paddock acted alone. Or if there was a fingerprint that did not match Stephen Paddock, whose fingerprint was on the tape? So if we're talking co-conspirator or conspiracy with other people, if someone else's fingerprint is found on this tape, or if someone's DNA is found on this mouthpiece, other than Stephen Paddock's, then we have an issue. So this is what initially motivated me to create this video. And this next clip shows how this is a reality and how you can identify a fingerprint on an adhesive piece of tape. And in this example, the piece of tape was underwater for several days, and they're still able to identify index fingerprints on the adhesive part. So there's going to be two clips here. The first clip is about 2 minutes, the second is about 30 seconds, but it should educate us on how forensics investigators pull fingerprints from the adhesive part of a tape.
With so little crime in Knoll, Missouri, the discovery of Dan Short's body in Grand Lake took almost everyone in town by surprise.
My little boy came home from school one day and I said, "Dad, they got the bridge blocked off. There's cops everywhere." And so I look outside and sure enough, they had the bridge blocked off, investigating. And I stood out on the deck of my porch and watched all the activities.
When police left the area, Rowdy Foreman did a little investigating of his own.
Curiosity got the best of me. We went back down to the shoreline, walked from east to west on the bank. We come to this one single dock, fishing dock, And there was a strand of duct tape, which appeared to be turned halfway inside out.
Was this the missing piece of duct tape investigators were looking for? Foreman knew not to touch the tape with his fingers, so he placed it into a bag with a stick.
When Mr. Foreman walked into my office that day with that piece of tape, it was too good to be true.
First words that came out of his mouth, "Oh my God."
There were 2, if not 3, patent fingerprints in this greasy, rusty residue.
Gentleman, he said, "Jesus. Jesus, I can't believe it."
Investigators analyzed the tape to see if it was the one missing piece.
I was conclusively able to match that piece of duct tape by end matching to the reconstructed roll of duct tape associated with the chair and the chain and the cinder block.
This was crucial, because without proof the tape was from the same roll, the fingerprints meant nothing. FBI fingerprint examiner Russell Davey could tell how the prints were left on the tape.
By grabbing the tape and pulling away from the roll, as can be seen by tearing it away, and then there would be prints present on the end of the tape.
The fingerprints were compared to those in the FBI database of past criminal offenders, and there was no match.
And I'm going to move on to the next clip here at 16:21. This is a short 30-second clip.
Because they're so close.
With this information, the FBI requested and received a court order for Shannon's fingerprints.
There was more than adequate number of ridge characteristics for me to come to the conclusion that these prints from the tape were indeed left by the index and middle fingers of Shannon Agofsky.
So I thought that that was really interesting. You know, I know that this was a TV show, but there's some legitimacy to it when you have these actual crime scene investigators and forensics people on here that actually did the investigation. And that, again, that is what originally interested me in creating this video, is that I had seen this episode at some point in the past, and I just made the connection with that piece of tape. And we know that somebody had used that piece of tape on the snorkel mouthpiece. Can never get to the right clip here. The snorkel mouthpiece. And the roll of tape was actually resting on this note in the leaked crime scene photos. So again, you know, if they can recover in that Forensics Files episode fingerprints from a piece of tape that was underwater for an amount of time, I would just be interested to see if there are fingerprints on the green tape and to see whose fingerprints they were. Because again, that would prove Lone Wolf, or it would prove somebody else tore that tape and put it on the snorkel. Next. This one I found extremely interesting. And I guess I've always known about the alternative light source and shining lights at a crime scene to pick up, you know, blood or semen. But I never connected collecting fingerprints with an alternative light source. And this one's very interesting to me. It's a safe way and a more preferred way in today's forensics to collect prints. So we're gonna watch clips that show us how this is done. And again, I'm showing these video clips because I'm not a expert forensics. I'm an amateur forensics guy who's interested in this stuff as it relates to the Las Vegas shooting. So the reason I'm showing all these clips is so that it further educates us on how professionals lift these prints. And now we'll go into this clip here that shows how using fluorescent light and 2 different methods to find prints on different items. And here, the same rule applies to dusting the surface, but now they reveal the prints through different sources of light. And this guy's going to show you how it's done.
Well, with the forensic light, you can find bone fragments, semen, urine, altered documents, fibers, and fingerprints. So we're going to do some of that today, and we're going to use 2 different light sources today. We're going to use a UV light, an ultraviolet light, and we're also going to use a blue light. The ultraviolet light, we don't need to use any goggles to filter out the light, but for the blue light, we will. So the light we're going to use today is I'm going to use what's called the battle light. I like this light because it has a plunger at the end to turn the light on. It has a dim switch. And what's nice about this is you can change the tips. So that way, you don't need to carry around several different lights. You can just take the tip off, and then we can use whatever light wavelength that we need. So I'm going to use the UV light to start. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to use my fluorescent powder to get some evidence. We're going to dust for fingerprints. I'm going to put my gloves on. And I have a couple items here that we're going to use. Now, when you're using a fluorescent powder, usually you would use a feather duster. You need the tiniest amount of dust, otherwise you're going to fill in the ridges of your fingerprint and you're not going to get a good print. So I have my red brush with my red powder, my green and green, and orange and orange. So we're going to start with the orange. And just like we saw when we used magnetic powder, it does matter what powder you use. The finer the powder, the better your print's going to be. So make sure you're using a high quality powder. So I'm going to use this piece of siding. I'm just going to dust that on there. I'm going to leave that aside. We'll use our green. Again, just the tiniest amount of powder is needed. Now with fluorescent powder, you may not be able to see the fingerprints until you use your light source. So let's start with this one. Now here's our fingerprint that we used, and this is with the naked eye without using any alternative light. Now it's pretty bright and you can see some ridges, but once we light it up, you see how much more brilliant the colors are. They stand right out and you can see the ridge detail. You would lift this print just as you would any other print. Let's look at some of our other evidence. So here's our piece of siding that we used. You can see the ridges right in the middle. And again, we're not using any filters. We're just using our light source. Now here's another piece that I did a little bit earlier. And again, if you look at it without any light, with the naked eye, I can't see any fingerprint on here at all. I'm going to use my battle light, and I contaminated it with the orange. But you can see a fingerprint in there as well. Now this one will be a little more difficult to see because we're on a white background. But again, can't see the fingerprints. Once we put our alternative light on it, you're going to see right here, there's a nice fingerprint. Now we're going to switch to using our blue light.
So as you can see, this is a good method to use when you think that there might be a fingerprint or palm print or whatever type of print on a surface. I could see this method being used, for example, at the bracketed stairwell door, where there's no visible evidence by the naked eye of a handprint, thumbprint, or whatever print on the door or the bracket. But if that surface was dusted and exposed by a blue light, as this guy shows in this clip, you can see how that would be valuable evidence, again, to make sure, 100% sure who applied that bracket, because they would leave evidence on the bracket itself and on the door. Now, if we were being told that Paddock wore gloves for everything, that might be a bit more difficult, obviously, to pull a fingerprint if someone was wearing gloves. But if anybody's ever worked in construction or just around your house, putting a simple bracket up, or sometimes those little things, like a screw or a bracket or whatever, or a nail, might be a little small and hard to work with the thick Home Depot gloves that we see him wearing. So it's a lot of times easier to use your bare hands with everything. So I grew up in a household, my grandpa as a roofer and a sider, aluminum siding, residential roofing and siding company. And I never saw him wear gloves. I grew up, my father liked to work in the shop on cars or whatever. He never wore gloves. So it's hard for me to believe that whoever applied the small bracket to the door wore gloves, and I believe that there would be fingerprint and palm print on the door and the bracket itself. Now I'm going to fast forward here to another method that he talks about. And in this method, he uses glasses, tinted glasses, and another type of light. So the point is, if you can't identify fingerprints with the method that he just showed us, there's another backup method that you can use to, again, try to identify fingerprints or palm prints.
What I have here is I have a sample sheet. And with the naked eye, and even with the filter without any light, you are not able to see any of the specimen. Once I shine my blue light on it, they stand right out. Okay, the same is going to be, now we had our other evidence. You can see how brilliant the colors are in the ridges in the detail. Let's see if we see it on some of our other evidence. And we'll look at the siding.
So again, you can see why these methods would be beneficial at a crime scene in trying to pull prints, trying to identify who these prints belongs to. So I thought that was an interesting one. And here are two examples again of the ALS, alternative light source, collection method. Now here's one that it relates to superglue fume testing. And it's where superglue vapors are put in a chamber and the adhesive collects on the print oils, and you're able to pull with the regular tape method and dusting method those fingerprints. So again, this is another method that forensics investigators use. And as it relates to the Las Vegas shooting, I believe that this method would be most useful. See if I can click the right one. There we go. On this tube. The other methods may not be effective on collecting print evidence on the tube because there are alternating surfaces and round edges on this tube. So the most effective method may be what I'm about to show you with the superglue fume testing. In this clip.
So we're going to be superglue fuming this plastic cup. When you do this, you want to be only superglue fuming on non-porous surfaces. Otherwise it won't work. And when you're superglue fuming, what is actually happening is the main ingredient is cyanoacrylate, and it is going to be polymerizing the fingerprint to the surface that it's on. And it does that by polymerizing the moistures and oils in the fingerprint. The reason why this is a good thing is it can help you to locate a print, and it also creates a print that can be lifted several times. So here we have the plastic cup that we're going to be superglue fuming. You just set that in the bottom of the chamber. And we also have a little dish of warm water. What the warm water is for is if the prints are old, it will rehydrate the prints that are on your non-porous surface. And then this is our fingerprint developer, the cyanoacrylate. And what you do to get this started is you pull it apart, and then we're going to hang it from here and quickly close this. You also want to do this in a well-ventilated area. Opened. Hang it up in the center. And when you close this, you want to make sure that you get all the way down around the base, around the bottom, because the fumes are denser than air, they're heavier than air, and they will escape out the bottom if you don't close it all the way. You're going to want to let that develop. Sometimes it can take up to 30 minutes. Now when you've seen that your prints have developed enough, you can go ahead and remove them from the chamber. Remove your object from the chamber. Now that our surface has been developed, we can go ahead and develop the prints further with some black powder so that we have a liftable print that we can place onto a print card. Let's go ahead and right over those prints, since we knew where they were at because of the superglue fuming showed us. All right, they've been developed with the black powder nicely. Now we can go ahead and use our fingerprint lift tape to take this black powder developed print off. We're going to work from one side to the other. smoothing carefully to ensure that we get in complete contact with those prints. Go ahead and lift. Very nice. We'll go ahead and transfer these to the back of our fingerprint card. Again, working from one side to the other. And there we go. Our 2 fingerprints.
So you can start seeing a pattern here in how fingerprints and palm prints or feet prints are collected in a few different methods, and how are they are documented typically on a piece of clear tape and mounted on a piece of glossy cardstock to be further investigated at the scene. And in this clip, she had used the super glue method on a cup. So perhaps the LVMPD or FBI investigators would apply this to the soda cans that were found in the trash cans. In the same respect to that, they could also collect DNA from the can itself. They could collect mouth DNA from, DNA from the snorkel mouthpiece, and they can collect DNA from any of the silverware or plates that were found on the carts that would prove Stephen Paddock's DNA alone, or if there was another DNA that did not match Stephen Paddock. So there's also another clip that interests me, and I'm using this guy a few times. But there's this image, right? We all know this. And we were told that Paddock was doing some calculations on distance to be able to shoot down at the people at the festival. And a lot of folks like me didn't necessarily believe that you would need to do that at a large group of people, because essentially you could just point and shoot, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel, unfortunately. So why write down calculations of distance unless you're hitting something specific? And even with the fuel tanks, those things are so big, I believe that you can just aim and shoot. But anyway, what you start to think about with this piece of paper and the notes is, was this really written down by Paddock? So you can do some handwriting analysis. But as the dude in The Big Lebowski knows, is that you can find out what was written below that top piece of paper. And in this scene, Big Lebowski, the dude, Jeffrey Lebowski, does some forensics analysis on his own. And we're going to find out what Jackie Treehorn wrote during his phone call.
I want mine. Yeah, all right, man. I mean, there are a lot of facets to this, a lot of interested parties. Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah? Where's that?
Now look at that genius Jeffrey Lebowski and his forensic skills lift what was written on a sheet that was below the sheet that Jackie Treehorn wrote on. So again, this is a joke, right? But this can be done. You can find out what is written on a piece of paper below or even above this piece of paper. So to me, I kind of see some indentations on this sheet. Maybe down here as well. So potentially, you know, this was at one time a sheet below another sheet, and somebody was jotting notes down on the sheet above this sheet and laid down impressions on this sheet. And what I'm going to show you now is legitimately how you can lift writing indentations from a piece of paper. And in this example, it's going to be several pieces of paper below what is written down, but it will show the method on which and how you collect that writing. And in this example, he's even going to admit that it's hard to see on the camera what the writing is. But if you sent this writing to a lab, they can further magnify and identify what the writing is. So again, Big Lebowski did a great job. That was Hollywood. This is how it's done in reality.
So now we have another issue that we need to address, and that's writing. So here's our pad. And we can see on here, there's nothing written on this pad. But now let's say that there was a note written on here that says something simple. I wrote "help me" on here. So we say, well, you know what? I don't know if that's really what this person was trying to say. Let's say it's a suicide note and it's questionable and you want to see if there were other notes written on it. We want to be able to get what was underneath it. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to be a little bit daring here, and I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3. We'll go 3 and see what we can get. So now I'm 3 layers deep on this pad. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use a black gel lifter. My hands are full of powder from the gloves. And I'm going to peel the gel lifter. And I'm going to put this over where the suspect writing is that I want to check for. Okay, now that I have this over the suspect writing, I'm going to use my roller. And I'm putting some decent pressure on here, because I want it to pick up any indentation that has been down. So now remember, there was the original writing, that page was torn off, and then I went down 3 layers as well. So I'm going to see if we can actually get some of the print or the writing on the black gel lifter. Okay, now it's going to be difficult to see, but I'm trying to see if we can get that on the camera. Let me check with my light. What you can see is through the indentation, you can actually see the message, and you're not going to be able to see it unless we shine the light right on it. Perhaps at the end we can do a close-up so you can actually see the writing, but you can see that there's actual, I wrote the message "help me" on there, and you could see that in here just through here. Now, through the naked eye, you're not able to see it, but if you put this through a gel scanner, that's going to light up like Christmas. It's going to be very, very clear. This technique is extremely helpful when you are doing bad checks. If somebody.
So again, there he's lifting writing from 3 sheets below what he just wrote. And the thing is, you can also do that on this sheet. So if I see writing here, and this is, we only have the sheet and we don't have the rest of the pad, you can lift the indentations off of this sheet. However, I do believe that the pad is over by the bar area. I believe that's where the full pad is, not positive on that. But if they had the full pad there, they could surely attempt to pull some handwriting on the sheets on that pad. So again, here's some another example on how you collect prints. And on this time, it's on porous material or paper. All the examples previously have been on hard surfaces or very semi-porous surfaces. And this is an example on how they use chemicals and steam to be able to lift prints on a porous surface such as paper. We go on and what it says here is who conducts the analysis. You know, sometimes if a local jurisdiction police crime lab can handle it, they'll do it. And sometimes if it's big and the local jurisdiction cannot handle it, it's performed by the FBI lab. So in the case of the Las Vegas shooting, we know from the FIT report is that the FBI had performed analysis as it pertains to forensic evidence. So in the case of the Las Vegas shooting, the FBI had performed the analysis. And we would like to see this analysis. And we'd like them to prove that Stephen Paddock was the lone wolf and that there was no conspiracy. So unable to do that, they need to prove that Stephen Paddock's fingerprints are the only ones that are found on firearms, tape, the ammunition, the hose, DNA on the mouthpiece, what is written on the paper, and a lot more evidence that I've talked about in previous videos. But as far as it pertains to fingerprint evidence, shh, my dogs are very vocal today. Quiet, quiet. So again, where is this analysis performed? In this case, it was performed in a FBI lab. And this image further shows how an investigator may analyze prints on a piece of paper. Shh, go lay down. So again, all these clips that were shown, starting from the forensic files and finding the prints on the tape and how that relates to the green tape that was found at the scene on the snorkel and on top of the note that describes distances, to how there might be potential for blood prints found on surfaces. In this case, if we're discussing a suicide or murder, if we find blood prints on a hard surface such as a door or a door handle, that might lead us to a co-conspirator or a murderer. It also goes on to how fingerprints are lifted. How do you lift latent fingerprints? And how are they collected and how are they sent to the lab? Goes on to talk about alternative light sources and how you can lift prints that aren't necessarily visible by the naked eye or other methods. It goes on to talk about superglue fume methods and why that would be important and how to collect evidence using this method. And I believe that it would be useful on surfaces like this tubing that have alternating surfaces. Again, this tape very well could have fingerprints on the tape. And this mouthpiece would definitely have DNA evidence from someone who had this in their mouth. Goes on to talk about fingerprints on paper, but in this case, writing on paper, and how to pull that from a piece of paper as it relates to the Las Vegas shooting in this Notepad. So here we see so-called distances, but to me it looks like there's some indentations and roughness on this paper, maybe even on the back that they're not showing us. But to me it looks like this piece of paper was below another piece of paper and heavy writing was being done. So they could identify what this writing is if they don't have the actual piece of paper with the writing. So again, all this information and all these videos are for educational purposes only as it pertains to a case study of the Las Vegas shooting. This is episode 5, Fingerprints. I hope you all enjoyed this one. There's a lot more video by others in this one. And like I said before, it really helps to explain, an expert to explain the method as opposed to me just talking y'all through it. So I hope that you enjoy it. I also believe that I've figured out the audio issues, so this one should be crystal clear. So I finally got the audio down. Again, hope you all enjoyed. See you on the next one.